This is the VW ID.4, the second in Volkswagen's all-electric ID series. The ID.3 was the first one, and I drove that last year as a sweaty solo vlogger. But this car is thought to be the mass seller. What is it? It's basically Tiguan exterior sized, and inside it promises the interior space of a Touareg, so a much bigger car. Welcome to the Late Break Show. So what is the ID.4? Well, I think it's more of a crossover than an SUV. You can see it's quite sort of heavily bodied, but not very high off the ground. The first versions, like this, are rear engine, so rear motored, rear wheel drive only. They will bring out a dual motor version in due course, and this car is, by the time you watch this video, this car will be on sale. Dimensions wise, interesting. It's 75mm longer than a Tiguan, 13mm wider, 63mm taller than a Tiguan. So the Tiguan is VW's piston, really big volume seller, kind of crossover SUV family thing. I think it's deeply boring, I'm not going to lie. But what I'm interested in is the packaging of this, because the interior is way more roomy than a Tiguan. The side profile, it is obviously 5-door only, and it's 5-seat only. You can't get a 7-seat. Quite a swooping kind of roofline, but look at the back end, it just drops off, and it's quite a practically shaped bum, which I think we've lost in a lot of cars recently. Probably a more practical bum than the Mach-e from Ford. And remember, this car competes with the Nissan Ariya, which hasn't come out yet, the Ford Mach-e, which has come out, and probably the Tesla Model Y, which hasn't quite come out yet in the UK. So looking at the specs of the ID.4, I mean, the car is based upon the MEB platform, which is VW's all-electric, bespoke kind of chassis, same as the ID.3. Again, 3 different powertrain options, all rear wheel drive, all rear motor, like I said, so the same as the ID.3. You've got 146 brake horsepower, 168 or 201, and the flagship 201 is this first edition, which is the one I'm testing today. And I believe this one has the 77 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is the biggest battery pack. The other entry-level one is 52 kilowatt hours. So WLTP range of the 77 kilowatt hour motor is over 300 miles. Not bad at all. I haven't fully charged it, it's only 80% charge, and it's absolutely bitter today. It's 2 degrees, it's freezing. When I look at its side profile, there's a couple of interesting shapes here, but I'll be honest, I think VW have intentionally made this version fairly kind of plain, because that will attract people out of maybe piston cars like the Tiguan into this and it not feel too alien. You get in the ID.4, and this is actually the first right-hand drive ID car I've driven. The ID.3 was left-hand drive, and I drove it in Wolfsburg. If you haven't seen that video, by the way, I'll put that above. I really like this light colour that they use on the steering wheel and the sort of the binnacle here and around there. You've got the usual kind of tablet that sticks off, protrudes from the dash, which similar to the Mach-e and a couple of the others. It's not really my thing. I think that's going to date quite badly. But what you more importantly are furnished with is a huge amount of space. VW said that this has the interior space of a VW Touareg, which is a huge SUV. Imagine if you could get people who bought Touaregs historically into a car that's smaller, exterior smaller, but interior just as big or bigger. It's got this sort of floating centre console. I don't know if you can see that. So it goes right round here with a little bit of a raised floor. And these cubbies are so deep. I remember this from the ID.3. Both seats have got adjustable armrests. And remember, because this is the first edition, it does come with a couple of extra bits and bobs. Slightly questionable materials, colours on the inside. Blue car on the outside, brown and grey. I mean, I'm a bit colourblind, but I don't know if that works. I like this bit. I don't know about this. And just like the ID.3, I can't help feeling that some of the, I'm looking down there at the bottoms of the doors, the materials don't feel as high quality as I would expect them to, remembering what the Golfs of past eras have given us and stuff like that. And yet VW has said that the materials in this should be more premium than the ID.3. I don't know. But what you do have is the same steering wheel, which is cool, and this same little floating pod. And this pod, remember here, puts it into D, puts it into reverse by notching it and then pressing it for park. And I like that. Other thing is there's no on button. You get in, and I've got the key in my pocket because it knew that. As soon as I climbed in the car, radio came on, it all lit up, it was ready to go. Infotainment. Now VW have come under a bit of fire and I wasn't really taken by the software at all. You can feel there's this sort of haptic feedback from all the buttons on the steering wheel, and here this is touchscreen, but down the bottom you've got haptic for the climate control, the volume control, and then you've got modes just down here like Eco, Comfort, Sport. I'll talk about this when I'm driving, but needless to say, I think loads of headroom, and I'm going to go and sit in the back in a minute, and I believe the back is of slightly elevated seating position, so higher than the front seats, which will be great for children. Oh, you got a little bit of a blue LED backlighting going on along here and on in the door handles here. But there's lots of cubbies. I like it down there. There's a wireless phone charging thing. 2 cup holders here. These little dividers, which kind of divide this big. Oh, you can put a flask on there, I suppose. This is all right. I quite like this. It'd be interesting to know what you think about the interior of this compared to the Mach-e from Ford, compared to the Tesla Y and the Nissan Ariya. A couple more things I forgot to mention. There's no paddles to adjust the Regen braking on the ID cars. You just have B. So when you've got it in D like that, you'll knock it into B, and when you come off the pedal, it'll be a little bit more binding. There's park there. And then the other thing I forgot to mention is down there by my feet. The pedals, like the ID.3, have got those neat play for throttle, pause for brake. It's a bit gimmicky, but it's kind of good at it. I quite like that. Sitting in the back of the ID.4, and this is crucial for a car of this genre, really flat back seat, so three abreast. You've got an armrest, of course, if you so want, and a ski hatch. The main thing is, got lots of legroom. I've set that to how I would drive, so I'm sat behind my own self. I'm 6'3" in old money. Flat floor, so the person in the middle isn't too compromised. Yeah, pretty good. Yep. Because under here, this seat is raised compared to the front because a lot of the battery pack sits under here. All right, and that's the reason. But I think it's good. I quite like it up here, and I can see straight out the windscreen. I think kids will probably appreciate this kind of elevated position. I'd like it with a panoramic roof, which the first edition doesn't have. Yeah, I like this. I think this is all right. It's practical. It's not like wow, but it's practical. I'm still not convinced about these interior colours. I like brown on its own, but brown and grey? Nah. Not with the white. It's a bit too weird for me. Okay. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. Before I forget. Towing capacity. If you're one of these people that wants to fit a tow bar, this will tow up to 1,000 kilos unbraked. So a ton unbraked. Talking of which, let's drive. Let's go for a drive. I do really like the driving position of the ID.4. This is almost as low, yeah, that's as low as my seat will go. You are sat quite high, which normally I don't like, but in this genre of car, kind of suits it. And the dash of the ID is really low, so you feel like you're higher than you really are. And I think a lot of people buy cars to sit high and to feel safer and better visibility over hedges and all that stuff. So this has kind of nailed that. I remember the ID.3 being having the acoustics of the cabin pretty well sorted, felt quiet and refined. I was driving on the motorway a short distance. It was a touch louder than I would have wanted at 70 miles an hour, but the problem is I'd only just got out of a Porsche Taycan yesterday, and that's really quiet and very, very aerodynamic. So at high speeds, impressively quiet cabin. I like this little binnacle a lot. I can take or leave that, and depending on what spec of ID.4 you get, this is 10 inch or 13 inch from memory, or yeah, and it does look a bit awkward. The haptic feedback kind of volume, physical volume there, do you know what, that's okay. That's better than I remember being in the ID.3. Look at that. Mercedes 124 outside an old barn conversion. That's old money spec. So the armrest is in a good position on the ID.4, and the handle here to open and close the door, it's a full hole, so that's pretty good. And then where your electric windows are and your mirror adjustment, it's slightly tilted. So this version is the only version available of the ID.4 right now, which is the first edition. It says it on the steering wheel, it says it on the front wings. It's got a couple of different kind of specs. The only battery available, 77 kilowatt hour, which is the big one, the long range, and it's the highest power output, 204 PS. So 0 to 62 in 8.5 seconds. So it's a little bit slower, I think, on the sprint to something like a Kia e-Niro or a Kia Soul EV, or a Kona, Hyundai Kona. Now the WLTP range of this car is 310 miles. And then the smaller battery pack, the 52 kilowatt hour, has a WLTP, I think, of 216 miles. I 80% charged it today, and it had something like 180, 190 miles. It's been cold all day. It's 5 degrees now. It was 2 degrees overnight. So again, it's a cold, wintry day. Not great for EV life. But I tell you what's quite cool. I found this. I went into the menu and you press the home button. It's a bit like a kind of tablet. And then you go to, where is it? Oh no, it's a physical button. You go into climate here. You press climate, which is a physical button, which I like because there's too much touchscreen shenanigans going on at the moment. And you've got the classic climate control, and you've got smart. And smart climate brings up this really simple menu which says, like, do you want warm my feet, warm my hands, cool my hands, fresh air, rapid cooling, defog the windows. So if I do warm my feet, it just does it, puts the aircon on eco if it uses aircon. This has the voice control because it's the first edition, I think. I tried it in the ID.3, absolutely hated it. I would never option it. I just don't see the point. Let's see if this one works. Switch my heated seat on.
To use the air conditioning, say for example, I'm too hot or my feet are cold.
My feet are cold.
Feet will be warm shortly. Please wait a moment.
And when it talks, there's a light bar under the windscreen, again the same as the ID.3, and the light bar kind of, it's the same as a smart speaker at home. If you've got one of these absolutely annoying pieces of shit, like Alexa or Hey Google, or, you know, that listen to you and possibly sell all your information to another country. I'm not saying whether they do or whether they don't. I'm not sceptical. Or am I? Nice generous centre console for storage. I've got my 2 coffees here, life support coffees. Deep binnacle there, as I said before. Good place to put your phone down there. 2 USB-Cs there, 2 USB-Cs there. And this adjustable kind of rig with a Venetian blind. Not Venetian blind, roller blind. What we're talking about. Do you know what? I'm driving on these roads that are particularly rough and bumpy, and I really think that this car's very good. I've picked some tricky Fenland roads today for this car. This is probably the smoothest bit I've been on, and there's lots of potholes and lots of areas where it can throw a car off. And despite the fact this is, I think, about 2.1 tons, it's a heavy car, the ID.4. Well, all EVs are pretty heavy. I think the suspension and the body control is pretty good. I haven't pressed on hard in this yet, but the initial feeling is that, yeah, it's very comfortable. I like the driving position. I don't think the interior materials are as good as VW make out. I'm not totally convinced. Some of it is, that's nice, but you can really see, I think you can really see where they've blatantly tried to cost cut. Now, if I stick, like I said before, there's no paddles for adjustable regen. You've got just B, just like you did when with the e-Golf, actually. Stick it in B, and when I come off the throttle, yeah, it'll just slow down a bit. It's not quite one pedal braking, but it's as close as you're going to get. The steering wheel buttons are a sort of haptic feedback, which I don't mind. So the electric motor in the ID.4 is called the APP310. I've got it written down. Yeah, assembled at the Kassel factory in Germany. It's the same as the ID.3. And if I put it in, you've got some, if you press mode here, you've got 4 driving modes: Eco, Comfort and Sport. I've got it in Sport, and I didn't even know it was in Sport. So it's nicely responsive. To be honest, it feels like sort of normal mode in a lot of the in the Hyundai or the Kia, but there's a brush in the middle of the road. That's interesting. But I like having a bit of regen with the B function. It'd be nice to have a bit more adjustment. Again, the Kia and the Hyundai have those options. I think 3 different stages. I think the steering is pretty good on this car. So far feels good. What you've got to compare it to, I suppose, is the Mach-e and the Tesla Y, which I haven't driven yet because we don't get it in the UK yet. Still waiting for that. The forthcoming Nissan Ariya. And it is slightly smaller, but the Kia e-Niro. I'm about to find a nice, flat, safe place to do a 0 to 62. Here we go. So 8.5 seconds. This is not going to be super quick, but I just thought I'd do it anyway, you know. Okay, that feels quicker than I was expecting. Okay, so it's 62. So it's 0 to 50, punchy, very decent. Of course, you've got lots of throttle response to do little nippy overtake manoeuvres and things like that, way better than it would if it was a diesel. No, I quite like that. That's pretty good. I'll be interested to see what the lesser powered ones are like, but I would definitely go for this battery pack. I'm not sure about the first edition thing. I remember when I drove the ID.3 first edition, it feels like the first edition is, although it gets a lot of kit and stuff, I just don't think it's worth buying one. I'd probably just wait a few months and get a non-first edition, unless you have a bit of FOMO and you desperately want to be the first. So when you come around the front, you realise you can blatantly see that this is a sibling of the ID.3. The facial features are really similar. This kind of full width kind of eyebrow going around here, the black and white badge and the black and white styling. Remember, VW's changed their logo to be black and white, especially for the EV stuff. I guess it's a transparency thing. But no radiator at the top end, a bit of a concave kind of face around here, and a bonnet which is receding back from this edge here. There is no froot or frunk. There's no storage in here. We'll have a look in a tick. And then down here you've got like a kind of cross-hatched matrix opening, and I don't think there's any active cooling. I can just see straight through to a radiator, and there's some active cooling vents in here presumably for the brakes and a bit of aerodynamics. It's 0.28 drag coefficient, if anyone was interested. you know. But funny enough, the 201 brake horsepower flagship version, which is what this is, it's the same power output as the Kia Soul and the Kia e-Niro and the Hyundai Kona. And you got to think of those cars as being a competitor to this, despite the fact that they're mostly a little bit smaller, I think. But in terms of range and in terms of power and performance, they're about the same. Let's pop the bonnet. I forgot to say when I did the intro that this car came out as a concept at the 2017 Shanghai Motor Show, I remember, called the ID Crozz. And although it's probably the least interesting out of all the VW ID ranges to come, it's going to be the one that sells the most, I suspect. So it's very important. Under here, there is no froot. So like the Mach-e, you've got a little area for storage and a couple of others, and the Tesla Y. You haven't got that on here. In fact, this is really boring. There is an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. And I know that at 7 kilowatts with a normal wall box, it's an 11-hour charge. And it can charge, I believe, up to 150 kilowatts, which is pretty good because there's a lot of places now which are around about that. It's not a very big bonnet though, is it? Not very big, not very big front end, not compared to the Mach-e. If you haven't seen my Mach-e review that I did a few months ago, I'll put a link above my head now. Quite a shallow back window on the ID.4 with this sort of aerodynamic spoiler. So that's quite fastbacky, but the roof is still high and the back's nice and chopped off, like I said before. I like the back end of the ID.4. You've got this full width kind of eyebrow kind of band again, which is pretty good. Very deep, no exhausts clearly because you don't need them. It's not a sporty car. There's talk of sporty versions of the ID.4 and the ID.3 using the GTX moniker, which they last used in the mid-80s, I think, which will probably have the dual motor. But at the moment, it's single motor, and the single motor lives under there, rear-wheel drive. Boot, crucial for a family wagon. And the boot is really good in this. It's 531 litres of capacity, which is only like 11 litres less than a Tiguan. So it's near as damn it the same. Very, very wide, not a flat entry point, but it's still really pretty good. And there's a tiny little lift up extra area for, I think, for cabling. You could put your charge cables in there, lots of tether points. There's a ski hatch and there's a 60/40 drop down. I like that boot, that's practical. And if you're wondering how this boot space compares to its peers, I'll put those specs up here now. I can hear a peacock. Did you hear the peacock? The 77 kilowatt hour battery pack which this car has is 493 kilos, so nearly half a ton in weight, whereas the 52 kilowatt hour battery pack is just under 400 kilos, I think. So yes, lots of weight. EVs are heavier than piston cars, but they carry their weight in a different way, typically right down low. This car is cheaper than the Ford Mach-e, it's cheaper than the Nissan Ariya, we think. It's closer in price to the Hyundai and Kia electric offerings like the e-Niro and the Soul and the Kona. This particular first edition, with the government grant, 38,700 quid, so it's about 40,000 quid. But remember, that's 310 miles WLTP, so a decent battery, a decent predicted mileage, 125 kilowatts of charging available, rapid charging. Onboard 11 kilowatt charger. VW have really put so much effort into the ID range because it has to work for them. I mean, billions and billions of investment, billions. I do wonder how this is going to stack up against those other cars to people in the big market, in the wide world. When the Tesla Y comes out in the UK, the Tesla Y will probably be really similar in terms of space. So when you recharge it at home, it'll be 11 hours on the 7.2 kilowatt wall box, this for the big battery version, and there's a filler on that side, I think, at the back. Your CCS will rapid charge up to 125 kilowatts. I think it'll do 0 to 80% in half an hour. And VW, like Ford and a couple of the others, are in bed with this Ionity rapid charge network, which is increasing by the month, and that's their best hope of competing with Tesla. This has an 8-year warranty, which is brilliant. I mean, 8-year warranties more than most people live with the car for. We're in 2021 now. 2022, we've only got to wait a year for the ID Buzz. By far the most exciting ID car in the range to me. So the reason why the ID.4 is VW's first global EV is because they're going to be making it in 3 different countries. They're going to make it in Germany, which is where it is right now, and they're going to make it in China, and they're going to make it in the USA. And that's why I suspect this will be the bread and butter ID model. I think I prefer the way this car drives to Audi e-tron SUV, which is significantly more expensive. But now I've found out that the rear brakes are drum brakes, I can't hide the fact that I think the brakes are disappointing. Steering's good, suspension's good. Handling's good. I think the thing about the ID.4 is it does a lot of things pretty well. It's not a really amazing looking car, but if you take the aesthetics out of the equation, I think it's well proportioned. I think there's a lot of room inside. It will grab people out of Tiguan's and Tuaregs and into full EV cars of this shape, and that is only a good thing. So irrelevant of whether you'll buy one over a Mach-e Mustang or a Kia e-Niro or a Soul or a Kona or any of those things. One thing I have to say about this: A, I wouldn't buy the first edition. I think it's too much money and I think it's a bit tacky. I would wait for just a normal one. But secondly, and here's the thing, there's a car called the Ioniq 5, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and it comes out later this year. Almost the same size, almost the same battery size and range, better performing, and looks wise blows pretty much everything, including Tesla's, out of the water. I really, really want to see this car because I think that could be the one. As usual, thank you so much for watching The Late Break Show. If you're already a subscriber to this channel, wonderful. If you support it through Patreon, thank you ever so much. If you've liked this episode, give it a like and let me know in the comments, would you rather have this or would you rather have something else? Thank you.